Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. I got a question from Brian. He wants to go over these points here you can read in the sidebar. He says, at the end, he says, is my ideas about morality concise and coherent? So, I want to start off by identifying morality as the actions that would lead to a successful life, or moral actions would lead to a successful life. Morality is that code of actions which lead you to a successful life, or the set of principles which guide your actions such that your life would be successful. This is morality. Now, starting off, number one, values are concepts that we choose to keep. We keep them by practicing them in our lives. Right? Ayn Rand said, a value is that which you act to gain and or keep. Okay, fair enough. Number two, humans live in a world with scarcity of energy and time, so we cannot hold all values or goals simultaneously and must select some values over others. So, all values come in a hierarchy. That's true. And your context sets your hierarchy. I have very, very little value placed on gold jewelry in my house. However, other people might have a lot of gold jewelry. If I had enough money to buy a really big piece of gold jewelry, there's a lot of other things I would do with it first at this point in my life. So, it is true that your context sets your relative values. I would not risk my life to change the political system I live under, because America's superb. But if you lived in East Germany, you would risk your life, and a lot of people did risk their lives to get out of East Germany into West Germany. So, your context does help determine your values. But you have to choose your values from this wide menu. So let's say we've chosen our values, and your actions to gain and or keep your values are your virtues or your morality. Virtue is let's not define virtue versus morality. All right, number three, a person must choose the values that aid them in living life effectively. Some values become paramount in sustaining life and may be elevated on a hierarchy of values to the top, right? Like freedom, for example. I would argue that pentultimate sacred values become non-negotiable to a person when dealing with themselves or others. Yes, this is freedom's a good example of that, where somebody says, it does not matter how much money they offer you or how beautiful or sweet the prize, you're not going to allow them to clamp chains on your neck and ankles and wrists, right? You're just not going to allow it, and you'll fight to the death. That's what World War II was about. So, and we have these people that have come here from China, and they were slaves. They were slaves in China. They come here to the United States and they hear our politicians talking about taking away our guns. And it's shocking to some of these people from China, not all of them, but I'm thinking about one particular Facebook post of a Chinese lady who says, they'll have to take my guns away from me after they kill me. I was a slave once before, and I'll never be a slave again. Okay, all right. So yes, some values are sacred, which sacred, you're using religious language, but sacred would mean really important to life, extremely important to life, right? Penultimate, he says. All right, very good. Number four, people with similar values are attracted to each other and form communities. These communities sometimes share sacred values, and it becomes the identity of the group to seek out others who support this value while pushing away those who would subvert it. True. Now, I want to point out the sour grapes in your batch there, because you could say, communities. I want to look at the 1800s in the United States because we had a very weird situation there, a litmus test for communities. Like, can a community just set in Europe for hundreds of years and rot? Yes. Can it go out and get new territory and grow and thrive? What kind of a community can actually grow and thrive? You know, Genghis Khan moving across, or the Visigoths coming down and taking Rome, or hundreds of years before that, Rome going up and taking over Europe. What kind of a culture is vibrant and moves out and pushes forward? And it was the 1800s. These groups came here, and you say, let's see, people with similar values are attracted to each other and form communities. Partly true, partly not true in the 1800s. Lots of people came here on individual merit and did individual things. However, they did group up in religious communities. Look at the Mormons and the people who attacked the Mormons. And there was always religion as a backdrop even to that. And, you know, the Congregationalists and the Presbyterians of Danbury, Connecticut, and, you know, Thomas Jefferson, Christopher Hitchens. Google all that if you don't know about it. So, people with similar values are attracted to each other and they form communities. Fair enough, but there is still diversity within those communities and tension within the diversity. Fair enough. Now, if what you're saying is not true, then we would have moved into America, we white Europeans would have moved into America, and we would have all lived side by side with the Indians and done our own thing. But you're saying that people with similar values are attracted to each other and form communities. And that has consequences. If that weren't true, then we could come over here, and even though our values were totally different from the Indians, we could have a community, right? But either we had a community here or they were going to have a community here. We're not both going to have a community here, right? People with similar values form communities. All right, good. These communities sometimes share sacred values and become the identity of the group to seek out others who support this value by pushing away those who would subvert it. Like a religion, government, constitution, veganism. Veganism's good. Green, the Green Party, is just like that, right? They seek out, it becomes their identity, right down to their garbage bags, the stuff that they bring their groceries home in. It's very important to them. And how do you know somebody's vegan? They'll tell you. That's how you know. And it becomes a religion. They institute it in government. They have heresies. They have witch trials. They're ruining people's careers for being climate deniers. They have heresy. They have the whole 9 yards. Everything you have in religion, you have in the Green Movement. Okay, fair enough. So this isn't necessarily a good or bad thing. You're just saying this happens, or I'm saying that. 5. This action of pulling people toward and pushing people away constructs a morality system in relation to the sacred value. Okay, so you're saying there's a central sacred value that the other values pivot around. So the non-negotiable value is the anchor, the central point. And the other values pivot around, are relative to, can be adjusted. But the central point can't move, can't be adjusted. Everything else is relative to it. It is the central point, the sacred value. Okay, fair enough. Actions supporting become good. Actions subverting become bad. Yes, fair enough. And how would you know an action supports or subverts? Now that's really what's important here, you know? Like, understanding that morality is a system of action is just the first step, but understanding how is it that vulgarity laws will lead to the destruction of freedom of speech, right? I would say, well, the principle is that you're telling people that if you don't approve of something they say, you'll stop them. So if you let that principle in, then that's going to just be a principle that gets continue being used. And they reply and they say, no, no, I'm just talking about pornography though. Only pornography. And I say, well, why? Because it's offensive, right? So if you're talking about offensive things. And they say, no, no, just vulgar things, right? So I'm saying that they're letting in the principle that you can stop somebody if you don't like what they say. That's what these pornography laws are, and pretty soon we have hate speech laws, and then we've got censorship, and we do. So there we are. Understanding the fact of morality as a system doesn't let you understand what is good or bad for your actual actions, what is subverting or whatever. So, all right, fair enough. You've got it so far. There it is, and that's what I say. Number 6. Once a whole community become unified, the value becomes an objective moral system. That goes too far. I mean, would you say that the Green Movement, just because it's unified, has become an objective moral system? What do you mean by objective moral system? I guess that's where we're stuck at this point then. So I put everything I've said here to you. Do I understand you? Do you want to correct any of that? But then what do you mean by objective moral system? Do you mean objective just the fact that it is objectively a actual system like the Green Movement? Objectively, it is a fact that they are a system, a religion or something? If that's what you mean, fair enough. But if by objective you mean focused on reality, I would say no. The environmental movement is not focused on reality. It's focused on groupthink, and ultimately that becomes very dangerous. Checking with reality is one way of believing, but always just checking with the group and ignoring reality, that's another way of believing. And they are never the twain shall meet. And so the people who believe in stuff despite the evidence are group thinkers. And they're all over the place. They're all around you, even on the right. It's not like the right is just individualists. But the left have a very special love for groupthink right now. All right, getting off on a different subject. So it depends on what you mean by objective moral system. But there we go. Are these ideas concise and coherent? I think so. I mean, I think you've got a general idea of what's going on. Now, what would be the next step once you identify that? Let's see what happens. How do you like that, Brian? Thank you for the question. Interesting discussion we begin here.